Samurai warriors dueling with katanas in honorable single combat. Noble swordsmen deciding battles through individual skill. Bushido code preventing deception or pragmatic tactics. Hollywood has turned samurai warfare into romantic fantasy where honor and blade work determined victory. The reality was brutal pragmatism. Real samurai were primarily horse-mounted archers who relied on mass arrow volleys, not swords. Actual battles were won through deception, night raids, betrayal, and peasant infantry with spears, not through the elegant katana duels that define the movie image. The tactics that actually won Japanese wars would horrify anyone expecting honorable single combat. Medieval Japanese warfare was about economic calculation, tactical flexibility, and willingness to use whatever methods worked. The katana was prestige symbol and backup weapon. The bow decided battles from horseback. Once you understand what samurai actually did in warfare, every movie battle becomes absurd fiction where nobody uses their primary weapons or real winning tactics. Walk onto a Sengoku period battlefield and you'd see samurai carrying weapons Hollywood ignores. The yumi, the asymmetric Japanese longbow, was the samurai's primary weapon, not the romanticized katana. The training started in childhood with archery, not sword work. Young samurai spent years mastering mounted archery, shooting accurately from horseback at full gallop. The skill took decades to develop properly. You'd watch samurai practicing until they could hit targets while controlling their horse with their knees, releasing arrows in fluid rhythm. The tactical dominance was absolute. Battles opened with massive arrow exchanges between mounted samurai formations. You'd see hundreds of mounted archers releasing volleys at 100 to 200-yard ranges, targeting enemy cavalry and command units. The arrows killed leaders, disrupted formations, and broke morale before swords were ever drawn. The yumi's construction was sophisticated, 7 feet tall, asymmetric design with the grip positioned 1/3 up from the bottom. This allowed shooting from horseback without the bow hitting the horse. You'd watch samurai using this unique design to shoot effectively while mounted, something European bows couldn't accomplish as easily. The effectiveness exceeded swords completely. A skilled mounted archer could kill from distance while a swordsman needed to close to arm's length. You'd see samurai engaging enemies, shooting, withdrawing, shooting again, using mobility and range rather than closing for melee. The bow kept you alive. The sword was last resort. The katana became prominent only after battlefield utility declined. You'd watch swords becoming status symbols during peaceful Edo period when samurai weren't fighting wars regularly. The sword's cultural importance grew precisely when its battlefield relevance had diminished. Movies show the prestige weapon, not the practical one. Samurai were horse archers first. The bow won battles while the sword won myths. Watch any major Sengoku battle and you'd see the warriors Hollywood ignores. The ashigaru, peasant foot soldiers who outnumbered samurai 10-1 and actually determined which side won. The economics required mass infantry. Samurai were expensive cavalry elites. You'd see daimyo fielding perhaps 500 samurai cavalry, but 5,000 to 10,000 ashigaru infantry. The numbers mattered more than individual quality. Battles were won by whichever side brought more bodies capable of holding formation. The yari, long spear, was ashigaru's primary weapon. You'd watch pike formations of ashigaru with spears 15 to 20 feet long, creating walls that stopped cavalry charges. The tactic was borrowed from Chinese and Korean warfare. Japanese commanders learned that dense spear formations defeated mounted samurai reliably. The arquebus transformed everything. Portuguese firearms arrived in 1543, and within decades, ashigaru, armed with Tanegashima matchlock rifles, were deciding battles. You'd see Oda Nobunaga at Nagashino in 1575, using 3,000 ashigaru arquebusiers behind wooden palisades to destroy the Takeda cavalry. Traditionally the finest mounted samurai in Japan. The peasants with guns killed the elite warriors without melee combat ever occurring. The discipline was trained systematically. You'd watch ashigaru drilling in formation fighting, learning to maintain ranks, respond to commands, fight as units rather than individuals. The training was months, not the decades samurai required, but the formations worked. Disciplined peasants in formation defeated undisciplined samurai fighting individually. The proportion was overwhelming. You'd see armies described as 10,000 men, actually containing maybe 1,000 samurai cavalry and 9,000 ashigaru infantry. The battles Hollywood shows, samurai fighting samurai, were small skirmishes. Real wars were decided by peasant infantry with spears and guns. The tactical reality was clear. Samurai were elite strike force and command structure. But ashigaru infantry were the army that won or lost battles through numbers and discipline. Read actual battle records from the Sengoku period and you'd see tactics Hollywood never shows. Japanese warfare rewarded cunning over honor. Deception won wars that honest fighting couldn't. The night raids were common and celebrated. You'd watch commanders like Uesugi Kenshin launching night attacks that surprised enemy camps. The samurai ideal of announcing yourself before combat was battlefield propaganda. Real warriors attacked sleeping enemies, set fires, created chaos. The victory mattered more than the method. The misinformation campaigns were sophisticated. You'd see daimyo spreading false intelligence about troop movements, feigning retreats to draw enemies into ambushes, sending fake deserters to spread disinformation. The deception was systematic and rewarded. Takeda Shingen was famous for military cunning, using spies, deception, and psychological warfare as much as actual combat. The betrayal was constant and expected. You'd watch vassals switching sides mid-battle if offered better terms. See castle commanders opening gates to besiegers after secret negotiations. Loyalty was conditional on success and reward. The betrayals that decided major conflicts, Akechi Mitsuhide's betrayal of Oda Nobunaga at Honnoji, showed that treachery was valid tactic, not dishonorable aberration. The castle sieges used starvation and negotiation. You'd see besieging armies settling in for months, cutting off supplies, negotiating with defenders, bribing garrison commanders. The dramatic assaults Hollywood shows were last resort. Real sieges ended through surrender negotiations, treachery, or starvation, not heroic attacks on walls. The propaganda created the honor myth. You'd watch victorious daimyo commissioning accounts of their battles that emphasized courage and honor while omitting the deception, betrayal, and pragmatic tactics that actually won. The Bushido ideal was created during peacetime by people romanticizing warfare they'd never experienced. Japanese warfare rewarded winning, not fighting honorably. The tactics that won wars would be called treachery in the stories told afterwards. Watch samurai cavalry in action and you'd see tactics nothing like European heavy cavalry. The mounted samurai used speed and archery, not shock impact and melee. The horses were smaller than European destriers. You'd see mounts that were 13 to 14 hands, pony-sized by European standards but suited to Japanese terrain and fighting style. The smaller horses were faster, more maneuverable, and required less feed than massive war horses. Japanese warfare favored mobility over impact. The armor was lighter and more flexible. You'd watch samurai wearing yoroi armor, lamella construction that allowed greater movement than European plate. The armor protected against arrows while enabling mounted archery. Heavy European plate armor would have been counterproductive for the fighting style samurai actually used. The charge was shooting approach, not lance impact. You'd see samurai cavalry charging to effective bow range, releasing volleys, then withdrawing before enemy could close. The tactic was harassment and disruption, not the single devastating shock charge European knights used. Multiple cavalry passes, each involving arrow volleys, wore down enemy formations. The melee combat happened after archery failed. You'd watch samurai closing for sword or spear work only when the arrow phase had created opportunities. The sword was finishing weapon or weapon of desperation, not primary cavalry tool. Even in melee, mounted samurai often used yari, spears, rather than katanas. The terrain shaped tactics completely. You'd see Japanese warfare in mountainous, forested terrain where European-style, heavy cavalry charges were impossible. The tactics evolved for specific geographic conditions. Mobility and archery worked where shock cavalry couldn't. Samurai cavalry were mobile missile platforms and fast strike forces, not the Asian equivalent of European knights. Position yourself with an army preparing for battle, and you'd see deployment nothing like Hollywood's chaotic clashes. Japanese armies used sophisticated formations adapted from Chinese military theory. The commander's position was rear center, not front leading heroically. You'd watch the daimyo directing battle from protected position where he could see the field and send orders. Commanders who died in combat lost the battle. Command survival mattered more than personal glory. The formation was layered by troop type. You'd see the front ranks filled with ashigaru spearmen creating defensive wall. Behind them, ashigaru arquebusiers formed firing lines. Samurai cavalry protected the flanks and formed reserves for decisive strikes. The entire army was organized system, not collection of individual warriors. The signals coordinated movement. You'd hear drums, conch shells, flags directing different units. The formations maneuvered based on these signals, shifting to meet threats, reforming after charges, advancing or retreating in coordination. Armies that maintained formation discipline won. Armies that broke into individual combats lost. The reserves decided outcomes. You'd watch commanders holding back significant forces to commit at critical moments. The battle wasn't decided by the opening clash, but by which commander could commit fresh reserves when enemy was exhausted. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was famous for reserve management, winning battles by knowing when to commit his uncommitted troops. The pursuit phase was systematic slaughter. You'd see the army that broke running while the victors pursued methodically. Most casualties happened during the rout, not during the formation fighting. Medieval Japanese warfare followed the same pattern as European. Battles were decided when formations broke, then won during the pursuit. The formation disciplines separated professional armies from rabbles. You'd watch well-trained ashigaru maintaining ranks while less disciplined forces dissolved into individual combats where superior organization couldn't help them. Japanese battle tactics were sophisticated and systematic, not the chaotic individual dueling Hollywood portrays. Follow a daimyo's military budget and you'd see the economics that determined which tactics were actually sustainable. Warfare was economic calculation as much as martial prowess. The army sizes were limited by rice production. You'd see daimyo calculating maximum sustainable force based on their domain's agricultural output. The ashigaru were farmers pulled from fields. Keeping armies in the field too long meant crops unharvested and next year's starvation. Campaign seasons were limited by planting and harvest schedules. The supply trains were massive and vulnerable. You'd watch armies requiring enormous logistics: food, arrows, gunpowder, replacement weapons. The supply lines were primary targets. Cutting enemy supply forced surrender more reliably than winning battles. Takeda Shingen's famous saying, "People are castle, people are walls," reflected that armies needed supply infrastructure more than fortifications. The firearms were expensive to maintain. You'd see arquebuses requiring gunpowder, lead shot, maintenance specialists. The ashigaru with guns were valuable investments requiring ongoing resources. Daimyo who could afford firearms enjoyed huge tactical advantages, but the cost limited deployment. The samurai wages were permanent obligation. You'd watch daimyo paying samurai retainers year-round through rice stipends. The samurai class was standing military force that required constant support. Increasing military strength meant increasing permanent economic burden that limited expansion. The alliances were economic as much as military. You'd see daimyo forming coalitions not just for combined armies but for shared economic resources. The alliances that won the Sengoku period, eventually unifying Japan under Tokugawa, were sustainable economically, not just militarily superior. The decisive factor was often economic endurance. You'd watch conflicts won by whoever could sustain armies in field longest. Oda Nobunaga's success came partly from controlling wealthy provinces that could fund longer campaigns than rivals. Japanese warfare was economic as much as martial. The tactics used had to be affordable to sustain across campaigns. Movies show samurai warfare as elegant sword dueling between honorable warriors. Real samurai warfare was peasant armies with spears and guns, cavalry archery, deception, and whatever tactics won battles regardless of later romanticization. Hollywood emphasizes katanas when samurai actually fought primarily with bows, then spears, and increasingly with firearms. The sword became prominent during peacetime as status symbol, not battlefield weapon. Films show individual combat deciding battles when formations and mass tactics determined outcomes. The ashigaru, who outnumbered samurai 10-1, never appear in movies despite being the actual combat force. Movies romanticize honor when real warfare rewarded deception, betrayal, and pragmatic tactics. The Bushido ideal was created long after the actual fighting by people who never experienced the brutal reality. Hollywood shows small-scale combat when real Sengoku battles involve tens of thousands of soldiers using sophisticated formations, coordination, and combined arms tactics. The samurai tactics that actually won wars were unheroic, pragmatic, and economically constrained. The bow. not the sword. The ashigaru, not just samurai. The deception, not just courage. The formations, not individual duels. Real Japanese warfare was as brutal, practical, and economically driven as any other medieval combat system, just with different weapons and cultural context than European warfare.